tonight. We've got somebody here who's going to tell us a little bit more about their experience, not just as a transition coach and a personal coaching specialist, but also somebody I think who makes it almost their life's not just work, but business, to journey on discovery of themselves and their mind, and the full potential of the mind. So a very warm welcome to Mr. Klasie Wessels, and please do continue.
Thanks, Annette. You can, am I on screen?
Yes, you are. We can see you. Please continue.
Thanks everybody, and thanks Jabulile for inviting me, and Lauren for your very moving personal account. Sure, I was changing my presentation as you were talking because I thought you're opening the door to a couple of things, and I'll get to it in a moment. But just if I can introduce myself for a second. I practice logotherapy. I studied logotherapy. I taught it at UNISA at the Center of Applied Psychology. I do coaching, but my sweet spot is to take people on mindfulness journeys to India and to Everest Base Camp in Nepal. And Lauren, I think I took some of your people in 2016. I'm going to just share a case study later about what happened on that journey to Everest with some breast cancer survivors. My personal connection, I haven't had cancer. My personal connection was years ago. I was still in business, and my brother, he died from pancreatic cancer. And I remember this moment where I was standing at the feet side of the bed, looking down the bed, and he had these blue eyes. And he said to me in Afrikaans, "My life had no meaning. My life didn't make sense. My life had no meaning." And yes, I didn't know what to say to him. I was still in the advertising business, making ads, but that sort of struck such a chord with me that I thought, how does somebody die with that question in their mind? Like this whole thing was a waste. And that actually led, and it was instrumental in me when I left my business. I changed my career about 15 years ago to do, for me, more meaningful things. And I got involved in coaching, but I like the experiential part of it. So taking people to journeys to India and logotherapy just resonated with me. And for the last 15 years, I've made it my mission to help people with these bigger questions of life. And logotherapy, if you haven't read Man's Search for Meaning, I really encourage you to go and buy the book. It's $150 at exclusives. It's 200 pages. It's a thin little book, and it's a story of Viktor Frankl. And tonight I'm going to tell you two case studies. I'm going to tell you about Frankl, and I'm going to tell you about some of the breast cancer survivors who I took to Everest Base Camp a couple of years ago. So let's start with Frankl. So picture somebody who's 37 years old. He's got a doctorate degree. He's a professor. He's a doctor. He's a psychiatrist. He's a neurologist. He's at the head of his game. He's working in the largest hospital in Vienna. Thousands of patients suffering from suicide at the time. It was before the World War, Second World War, was coming through. He makes a comment that he has treated more than 12,000 suicide patients in the course of his career as a doctor. So he knew about depression and suicide and people having unavoidable suffering, as he would call it, to that extent. So here you are at this stage, and they take you away and they put you in a concentration camp. And for 3 years, you have to survive while people around you are being gassed, medical experiments, which they die from. His wife died, his whole family died. And he made it. So his philosophy, which is logos is the Greek word for meaning. So it's a meaning-centered form of counseling, a philosophy and of counseling. So it's a philosophy and a therapy sort of rolled into one. So he developed logotherapy. So this is not somebody who read a couple of books and did some research and found an approach. He lived it. He is the research. He is the object of the research. So this is a really, really, really powerful approach. And I'm going to share some highlights now. You know, this is it's a big body of work, and if you read Man's Search for Meaning, you know, Frankl was a scientist. The reason why you don't see in the popular press is he didn't write for normal people. He wrote for scientists. And then on top of that, it was translated from German into English. So some of his books, he's written something like 40 books. Some of his books are unplayable. They are really, really, really difficult to understand. Well, for me, they're really difficult to understand. But Man's Search for Meaning is an introduction, and it will get you going. And as a philosophy to navigate yourself through dark places is hugely, hugely useful. So I'm going to just touch on a couple of sort of, you know, if you were to ask, how did you survive? How did Frankl survive the concentration camps? I sort of pulled out about 10, you know, sort of key pointers that maybe is interesting to you. So the first thing he will probably tell us that we have to live by choice. You know, life is living by choice. Now, not only us having to make decisions, like which way to, you know, what must I do? You know, because, you know, often that is the question that we have. But also consider that sometimes life is asking from us. You know, mostly we want stuff from life. You know, we want things this way. I want more of this, less of that. You know, we are demanding from life. But there comes a time where we need to turn that question around. And, you know, none of us are ever free from obligations. We all have responsibilities. We all have obligations. But we are always free to decide how we're going to react. And Frankl refers to this as between action and reaction, there's a little space. There's a small little space. It's a couple of seconds. Sometimes it's a day before we react. Sometimes it's a second. Sometimes we don't even stop to react. But in that little space, there is the opportunity to do something that is meaningful. His philosophy is built on three key tenets. Firstly, that life is potentially meaningful even in suffering. He is not saying that only by suffering, only by having unavoidable suffering, can you discover meaning. That's not what he's saying. He's saying that life has got meaning despite suffering. The second thing that he will teach us is that as humans, we are driven by meaning. You know, often we chase pleasure. We think if we have a little bit more money, it'll be okay. If I have a new car, it'll be okay. New this, new that. You know, stuff. I'm going to get okay if I have stuff. If this changes in my life, I'll be okay. It's not like that. We are driven by meaning, and what I mean by that is that we want to make a difference. We want to be useful. We want to do what is right. Because then we will feel that it is worthy, that I am worthy, and that life is worthy because I am experiencing meaning. That's very different from pleasure. Of course, we want pleasure, but pleasure is a result. It's not something you can chase. And the third thing he will say that we have a freedom of will. As human beings, we have a desire to express ourselves. We want to do things. We want to say things. We want to move. We want to be creative. We have a will to freedom, as he would say. Also, having a clear mission in life. You know, that being dedicated to a cause that is worthy of our efforts is really touching the human spirit. Now, this is referring to the why, that this clear mission. This is a mission. We have lots of things that we want to do, but this big thing, and this is not something that can be prescribed. Nobody can prescribe this to you. It is something that you will have to discover for yourself. But this mission of your life, you know, and often we talk about the why, and there's I'm a great fan of Simon Sinek, if any of you've come across his work, and he calls himself the why guy. But Nietzsche, hundreds of years ago, Nietzsche was the first why guy when he said, he who has a why to live for will bear almost any how. And if you just think for yourself, if you know why you're doing something that you're doing, and that why is a big why, like your kids or your loved ones or whatever it may be, you will walk walk over broken glass, you'll walk through a brick wall, you know, you will move mountains if you have a big why. Another thing that Frankl will point out is retaining human dignity. Now, dignity I mean, Mandela said, no power on earth can destroy the thirst for dignity. Dignity is such a driver. And often we confuse usefulness with meaningfulness. And Frank will say we mustn't confuse that if you are not useful anymore, doesn't mean you are useless and meaningless. That's not the case. And I'm going to use my father because he's my father, so I can use him. He died a couple of years ago. When he was 93, he was pretty useless in terms of conventional terms. You know, he was an old man sitting in an old age home, not really know what's going on. You know, it was just like, he was like just sitting there waiting to die, basically. But that didn't make his life meaningless. The fact that he was not useful made him hugely inspirational for me because he retained his dignity, you know, and as human beings, to retain our dignity, even in times like this, and in the times of the concentration camp, to be dehumanized is the real source of suffering. And for us to hang on to our dignity is a source of power, which leads beautifully into defiancy. And Lauren, you were referring to defiancy earlier on. You know, when Frankl said everything can be taken from man, but one thing, that last human freedom, the last human freedom we have is to choose our attitude. And he tells the story of a young girl who was standing in front of this prison guard. And she was apparently naked, standing there, and she didn't look upset or flushed. She looked composed. And he said, you know, he questioned her, like, how are you? I don't know what he asked her, but, you know, the story goes that he said, now, how are you like this? And she said something like, you can take anything from me, but you cannot take my dignity. And that is a defiant stand that she took to hang on to that thing. I travel a lot to the East. I go to India a lot. I deal directly with the Tibetans. Some of you may be aware that the Tibetans and the people of the Dalai Lama, they live in exile. They're in India. China took their country and they escaped 60 years ago. And when I take people into the Himalayas there's a wall with photographs of people burning. And it's a concept called self-immolation. So the Tibetans inside of Tibet, where China has taken them over, because the world doesn't know what's happening there, nothing can get out. It's all, you know, the Chinese lock it off. Nobody knows, you know, you don't know what's happening on. It's very difficult rather to get information out. Have started to self-immolate. So basically what they will do is they will pour gasoline or petrol over themselves and set themselves alight, hoping that a video will find its way into the West so that people can see what's going on here. Now, I'm telling you this not for you, I'm not for you to feel sorry for them, but to show you the defiancy that exists in us as humans. We all have that power. We all have that power to say, you know what? As Frankl would say, we have the ability to defy our sociological, our psychological, and our biological realities, to take a stand despite our circumstances. And Lauren, I think you referred to that a while ago. You will also point to self-transcendency. So the concept of self-transcendency is to get beyond yourself, get over yourself, and to live for someone else, some cause or some loved one, or some other person, to transcend yourself, because often we are so wrapped up in our own stuff that we make that the main agenda. And for Frankl, the connection to a loved one or the connection to a cause gave him the strength, gave him the sense of meaning, gave him the sense of purpose in order to navigate through tough times. I mean, there's a quote by the Dalai Lama that says, the purpose of life is not to transcend the body, but to embody the transcendent. So it's you know, get your head around it. What it basically means is that we shouldn't try and live longer, healthier, and becoming perfect. We mustn't try and get that sorted, but we should embrace life with all its imperfections and with all our imperfections for the sake of other people. That's basically what he will tell us there. he will also say life is we're never there. Life is an ongoing quest. We are never there. It is never finished. We will never arrive. Up to the last minute, we have the opportunity to make sense of things and to experience meaning and to discover it. But it is something that that we have to do for ourselves. It's not something that can be prescribed. Living with uncertainty, clearly, I mean, we, you know, in the West, we want things organized, we want things sorted, but there's a concept in the East which it's called emptiness, and I can't explain that fully, but what I can say is that things are beyond certainty. Is not something that is part of our reality. You know, we want things to be certain, but things are never certain, and it's a reality of life that we need to accept. And the more we resist and want certainty, the more we're not going to get it, and it's going to disappoint us. The last one that he will probably point out is that we must live by our conscience. You know, that even if I just do it for not for myself, but even I'm in the lineage here, and as a person in my own lineage, I have to take a stand. And I have to answer. And if you're religious, you have to answer to God or to whoever higher power you have. But you have to take a stand and by your own conscience, not disappoint yourself. Okay, so I'm going to change tack now. I hope this is not too philosophical for you. You know, it's such a beautiful philosophy that Frankl has to share, and I just wanted to give you a quick glimpse with that. I'm now going to move and tell you the story of some ladies that I took to Everest Base Camp. So, Lynette, just let me know. So, can you see the screen with a woman? Can you see them?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
All right. Okay,
Yes.
so a couple of years ago, I took a group. I take people to Everest Base Camp, as I mentioned it to you, and the journeys to India. So the idea there is to take people into a very, very unusual external environment, to let them have an extreme external experience in order to manifest an internal journey. So it's actually about the internal journey of the person, but I take them into very weird places. In this case, Nepal, Everest Base Camp. So we fly from Joburg. We fly to Kathmandu, and this is a picture taken in Kathmandu. So there's Soso on the left, and then there's Melanie, and there's Philwe, and there's Henrietta, and Tobile, and Tokozo in the front. So I took, and there were other people also, but this photograph is now only with the Breast Health Foundation ladies. And I was taking them to this place. Now, just to give you a scale, in the middle of your screen, there's a guy standing with a camera, and there's a bird flying. So this is Everest Base Camp. So from Kathmandu, you fly to a place called Lukla, and then you walk for 60 kilometers on a very steep path high up into the Himalayas to eventually reach Everest Base Camp. So it's a really tough journey. I mean, at this point, there's half the oxygen that's available at sea level. So your companion at this place is headaches, nausea, you're not feeling well, you've got no appetite. It's a very, very tough experience. But the Himalaya, the power of that is that it opens you up to, as what Frankl will call, your spiritual realities. You know, you just become aware of you in this life, your existence, and you know, things like Lauren, you spoke about death. The Tibetans would meditate on death, because the paradox is that the more we are aware of death, and they see death as a portal, they see it as a door, not as it's not the end of something. You know, it's just, you know, every night when you sleep is a little death, and you know, every morning is a new birth. So the paradox is that the more you meditate and become aware of death, the more you appreciate this life and become energized to make the most of it. You know, as Westerners, we say life is short. You know, we have, so life is quick or whatever, and that's not true. I mean, I can die tomorrow, or I can live for 20 years. I don't know how long I'm going to live, but life is precious. And when you go into a place like the Himalayas, you get, you know, you become aware of that. So you get people like this. Here's a mother, and she's smiling with a baby, carrying an incredible load, up steep steps, beautiful mountains. So and high rivers. So this is where I was taking this group of women. And I'm going to come to, and you have the porters carrying these heavy loads, everything. There's no cars there. It's just footpath. Everything gets carried up. So into Kozo. So what happened is we were walking for 6 days, and by the sixth day we get to a very steep pass for lunch. Now, as I said, at this point you're way above 4,000 meters. It's higher than anything. I mean, the mountains in Africa are it's not very tall at all. I mean, Kili is, I think, 5,900 meters. Everest is 8,800 meters. There are 14 peaks in the world over 8,000 meters. They're all in the Himalayas, and 9 of them are in Nepal. That is the place of altitude. From the first day that you start walking, every mountain that you see is higher than anything on the African continent. We have no concept of altitude in South Africa. We got no idea. So this is a very, very stressful place. But it is stressful to unlock, some deeper spiritual things inside ourselves. So 6th day, realized Ntokozo is not going to make base camp. And she was working for BHF, and they were the group of women were tasked to, or the idea was that they become brand ambassadors for what is possible despite having had cancer. So how beautiful is that? These women all survived cancer, and they are strong enough to do this thing, to actually go to base camp and to walk in these tough conditions. So now, and also Ntokozo had to take a flag up for Sally Robinson, Sally Roberts, sorry, I'm getting the name wrong, who passed away from cancer, and she had this banner that we had to put up at base camp. So now she couldn't carry on. She had a stomach problem, and it was very, very, very disappointing. Shame. I felt so sorry for her. She was in tears. It was very, very painful. 6 days into the walk, there were 2 days to go, and she wasn't going to make this. And I mean, she's a beautiful, beautiful mother, salt of the earth. And I felt so, we were all in tears when we sat there at lunchtime and discussed that she has to go back. So I have this conversation with her, not reaching base camp, not reaching your goals, sort of not making it, just trying to work with her on this emotional stress that they must be feeling. Anyway, she flies off to Kathmandu, and I'm going to just, we're now all sitting in our homes, and I'm just going to play a very short clip. The purpose of this is just to give you some audio of the environment that we were in. So it's just 30 seconds or so. I'm doing my best to try and make you feel the drama that Ntokozo and we all were feeling by the time of her evacuation. So just let me just play this for you. So there she goes. Let me just go back to this one. So there she goes off to Kathmandu, and I didn't see her for another 5 or 6 days. Now, the other thing that she had questions of having had cancer, surviving cancer, and all these people are dying around her, and she's working for the BHF, and it's tough dealing with people who've got this suffering every day. So it was weighing on her. Anyway, we get back to Kathmandu, 5, 6 days later, and I went, I meet her at the hotel. She's out of the hospital. She's all good. We all get together, the whole group's together, and we all like celebrating, being together again. And she said to me, "I want to tell you something." I said, yeah. And we have a bit of a chat. And she said, her words were, I almost died on that mountain. And I almost died from cancer, but I didn't die from cancer. But now I know why I survived. I am here to represent the people who have gone before me. And, with that, with her not reaching base camp, she adopted that position to be the ambassador for the people who've gone before and to proudly stand. And I, just on a personal note, I think had she reached base camp, she wouldn't have had that insight, So there's so many lessons in that case study that sometimes not reaching your goal opens you up to another lesson of life. And I just got to take my hat off to her, and it's an absolute heroic, case study. There's Refilwe and Henrietta at base camp with Sally's flag, which they leave there, and that's the whole lot of us just celebrating, reaching it. You can see the pink. So yeah, I think that's the end, Lynette. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity to just give you an insight into the thinking of Frankel and to share a case study with you of what is possible despite having had cancer.
So the one comment we have for you, Klasie, is that we didn't hear the clip that you played. I don't know if you could possibly replay it for us. I don't know whether it was supposed to have audio that we could hear.
Oh, Lynette, it doesnn't matter. It's just the rotors of a chopper. It was the sound of the chopper.
Oh, okay. We thought we were supposed to hear.
Yeah, it's not. The reason I wanted to put it in, because we're all sitting in our homes. We in beautiful environments. We're sitting with electricity and light and cup of tea, and it's we're warm and we have a bath with running water, and the space where this happened is so harsh. And I was trying to just let you get a feel for it, because it's difficult to relate to this with just a static picture, but it was just a soundtrack of a helicopter. That's not a.
All right. So we thought it was supposed to be audio. Thank you, She, so much for that. Just I'm listening to some of the comments that are also running on the side, and I think, as I said when you opened, we're all here and we're learning and we're taking home so much. And I know certainly I'll go into a bit of a rabbit hole now, looking at what logotherapy is about, and certainly just saying those women who've already overcome so much, now being in an environment like Nepal, not many of us aspire to climb Everest, let alone get to any of the base camps. But I think sometimes when we see others who've gone there, we start to think about, what is our own base camp? What's our own Everest? And what is it that we want to achieve? And how do we implement some of the things that you're just sharing into the practice and our own conscious about our own lives? So I know certainly I've got a lot to think about, and I definitely know that everybody else who is here with us tonight probably has quite a bit to think about too. That's if you're not going to get a bunch of calls from a lot of people who may now want to suddenly come with to the next base camp adventure. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Klasie, for sharing that with us this evening.